Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest this week is Jonathan Sackett, a former D1 track athlete turned music industry insider who recorded at Paisley Park and Flight Time before moving into advertising, where he built award-winning work for giants, get this, Geico, Coca-Cola, Walmart, McDonald's, IBM, Harley-Davidson, Budweiser, Mars, and I'm out of breath, so I'm going to stop. He did it at agencies like FCB, the Martin Agency, DDB, and Ogilvy. He now partners with former NBA star, Jamal Mashburn, as a board member of Mashburn Enterprises, and he serves as VP, head of MarComm for the Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership, where he rebranded the org to NEI and launched the NEI Pioneer podcast, which topped, drumroll, 6 million views last year.
Jonathan, no media buy either.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, welcome to the show, my very newfound friend and long-lost brother, Jonathan Sackett.
Steve, I got to tell you, man, on the pre-show talking to you, that could have been the show. I swear to God. Now the pressure is on for me to perform, I think. And besides that, you can read my resume back to me anytime. It makes me feel better about myself.
You know, I say this in front of so many episodes, but I swear people are like, you have a burgeoning side business, meaning me, where I just read people's bios as they enter a stage or something.
Well, yeah, and plus, seeing you, I've got Tom Petty peeking over your shoulder at me.
Exactly.
So I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness.
And I want to start with your agency side, if we can.
Yeah.
Not to date you and say you're old, experience, as I like to say, people of our age, but you were one of the first chief digital officers in the entire country.
Yeah, I was number 2. So
when you stepped into that role, what were brands and agencies failing to understand about digital?
Oh my God, everything. I think, it was tough because if you take the typical agency structure, right? You've got analytics, account management, creative, tech, consumer insights, whatever, all those departments. They didn't know where to put me. So I didn't even know that. I got a call there was a magazine out called 1-to-1 magazine. And they said, hey, we're interviewing the first 4 chief digital officers. And I said, oh, really? What number am I? And they said 2. Number 1 was a guy named John. So I was number 2 to begin with. How about that? But John Philippe, I think, was the guy's name from Ogilvy, was the first, and I was the second. But to answer your question, it was weird because the chief creative officer would tell his teams not to listen to me, right? The tech guys would say, so you're coming in to battles in every single strategic meeting, but I'm a creative guy. So, and if you don't know the platform that you're on and you don't know the constraints of it, and I'll never forget my first day on the job, I was there till 2 a.m. because they had screwed up it was called Tag Testes. So you can make your own joke there. Remember Tag Body Spray?
Oh, yeah.
They built a website called tagtestes.com, which you get the meaning.
I do.
But what they did was they had outsourced it to a small digital shop. And the digital shop guys called me and they said, hey, they told us to build the site in 3D software. I was like, what? You know how heavy that is? So you couldn't watch it and you couldn't open it, when you could have had this person standing in front of a tile that would look like they're in a room, right? But they didn't know that back then. So a lot of it was janitorial work, just trying to get people to understand the power and the limitations of digital itself. So I had to wear all hats, tech, creative, account management, everything all at once.
Okay, so I got to ask the follow-up to that. That was then. What do brands and agencies still don't understand about digital now?
It's the same thing. You got to have one foot in the future and you got to have one foot in today's reality. And I think what happens is there's always a flavor of the month. The flavor this month is AI. And AI is a great, useful, wonderful tool that's going to take us all out someday, I believe. But I think right now what's happening is it's the flavor of the month. But if you don't have sound business foundation, and I always say FUAS, right? Found, utilized, advocated, and shared. So you got to start by working with SEO, GEO for AI. You got to start there, because if you're not found, the rest of it doesn't exist.
Right.
So I think what happens is these flavor of the months come into these agencies, and the agencies are still coming after me to come back, and I would love to, but the problem is you can't unless you build that solid foundation and build upon it. So we're getting found, search is working, our digital ecosystem is there's no dead ends in it. It's the basic principles that are usually missing because somebody needs AI on their resume, and that's sad, but that's reality.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned before, you worked with some really big brands. You like creative and strategy, McDonald's, Coke, Pep, Progressive, Geico. Take us behind the curtain, in some of those brand rooms and war rooms, what it was like.
Okay, 2 a.m, all the time, and because you got to remember, I'm always in every new business pitch as well. So you got to architect the challenge. Like, I think back to so many times, like McDonald's. Let's take them for example. Do you know why the McRib is a seasonal sandwich?
I do not.
And it sells out every time, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why it's a seasonal sandwich is McDonald's single-handedly depletes the world's pork supply. Okay, so you'll notice that McDonald's doesn't have it every October. No, they have it every time the price of pork goes down below a certain threshold. Then they buy it all up. Then they can't sustain it because they just forced the price of pork to go through the roof. So they buy it, they sell it, flavor of the month, they're done. One of the things that saddened me about working with McDonald's was they were getting pig piled. I call that when people online are all dissing you in some capacity. These guys, do you remember the whole thing with the chicken nuggets, and they're not real chicken, and they're constantly getting bombarded with that kind of stuff. Most of the chicken nuggets when I worked with them were pork, and the French fries. How many ingredients were in a French fry when I worked with them?
Hit me.
17.
Oh my
17. God. I heard it's 19 now. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, the reason I say that is because they have a executive chef at corporate there, and his name is Chef Dan. And I put together a YouTube channel for Chef Dan because I figured that would be a really good way to combat the pig piling, right? McDonald's is bad food, it's not real food, whatever. And Chef Dan, we launched it, and it was a huge success right from the get-go. And then McDonald's said, yeah, we don't want to do that anymore. So we did like 2 or 3 in the can, and then we never did it again because they thought it was getting them too much attention, which is odd.
Yeah.
But if you start to go through all of them, like Geico, you learn all the industry secrets. Geico. You know what Geico stands for?
I do.
Government Employee Insurance Company.
Correct.
Right? And the thing about Geico was everybody, whenever I would give speeches, you and I were talking about, you were speaking at Harvard, and I spoke there a couple times. And what happens, the number one question I always get is, you guys don't make any sense. Why is there a caveman, a pig? There's hump day. There's, it's frenetic. It's all over the place. Well, the truth of the matter is, when I was working with them, Horizon Media did all the media buys. The media budget for Geico was $1 billion. $1 billion. Now, you got to remember, if we were doing commercials and just constantly throwing a gecko in there, you'd kill us. The brand would be so tired. So you're constantly you always go by the value proposition of 15 minutes could save you 15% or more by switching your car insurance. But the reason why we had to switch it up so often is because we did advertainment more than advertising. And if you can't just do one thing. We lost half of our team because they launched that caveman show. I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
It didn't last very long, and most of the team quit to go to Hollywood. And I tried to tell everybody, look, guys, they're not going to listen to you, man. I'm telling you, you're a guy who does commercials, and that's not the bomb like you want it to be over in Hollywood. But that's what happened with that. I mean, oftentimes these brands, when you're in these strategy sessions and meetings, you don't have legal in the room, so you can be up all night coming up with the stuff. The next day, Tylenol. Next day, we would meet with their legal team, and they'd say, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Talk to some listeners who are thinking something like this. Hey, that's great, Jonathan, but I don't have anywhere near that budget, right? But I want to, quote unquote, be different. I want to do this. I want to do that. How can a smaller brand, and when I say small, I don't mean smaller than McDonald's, Progressive, Coke, Geico, all those. What would you say to those brand leaders who go, that's great, but I don't have $1 billion, so I'll just keep doing my little thing.
The truth of the matter is that brings up, I was working with all 16 brands of Tylenol, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a room with one of the brand managers. It was like children's Tylenol or something. And she was bidding on keywords online. Well, the price was going up as she was bidding for it. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. And I ran down the hallway and I saw one of the other brand managers for Tylenol PM or something was bidding against her for the keywords. Okay. So the price is going up and they don't even know it. And the reason why I bring that up is, if I'm in a situation right now, and it was a passion project for me to join Northeast Indiana and rebrand them, you're talking a marketing budget of less than $200,000, which is nothing. And I wanted to help, and I figured I could make an impact and help them to punch up. So I rebranded it and launched the show and did all these things. There's certain things, if you have a creative mind, you can punch up and you can take people on and not just be a blip on the internet. Really simple, basic things. So what I did with the Pioneer platform that we created was I reverse engineered from search. So when people are looking to, so what NEI does is economic development,
Mm-hmm.
right? So get other countries and people to come to Indiana. So once I rebranded us, now we've reached people and corporations have come here from Japan, Germany, UK, Ireland, Brazil, and that's because we found what's on people's minds. The vernacular that they're using to search for you and things like that. And I just started to feed the content engine with the things that people were looking for. Oftentimes these companies, the smaller companies, they're trying to punch up so hard and they're trying to be creative, but what they're not understanding is the vernacular and tonality that their customers are using.
Yeah.
Just by matching that, you're going to punch up.
Yeah, and thank you for that segue into, because I want to talk about NEI next, about, and you mentioned it's a passion project, right? So you kind of already answered that, why at this point in your career you're doing this in addition to the other stuff. But I'm curious, when you first started at NEI, like, was it was it a blank slate? Was it you had to fix everything all at once? Like, walk us through like what you walked into.
Yeah, it's again, I come in and I make a lot of changes, right? I get the impression, Steve, you would do the same thing.
Yep.
But the truth of the matter is that they had, so you've got NERP. They were called NERP, Northeast Indiana Regional Partnership, and I was not going to be called NERP. Okay, so make your own joke on that one. So what I said was, there was an agency that did NEI, and right a floor below us is GFW, which is the Greater Fort Wayne Chamber of Commerce, and they used the same color in the two logos, and it was a crappy green. We were called NERP. We had an agency that was holding our website hostage, so every time I wanted to update anything, I was on the clock, so I couldn't get access to the own back end of our website. Our color palettes were terrible. We were predominantly doing direct mail pieces and just cards.
Yeah.
I found 10,000 of the cards in the back room. I'm like, you guys, we're switching everything. So I asked the agency to give me an estimate. Here, we're going to launch a new website. Okay, $75,000. I said, you guys, we're a nonprofit. So I called my guys in LA who've worked with me in the past and said, I need to build two websites, pioneerstartshere.com, where I showcase all of our video and our awards and the show and everything, and then neindiana.com, which is the business site, right? Find properties, why you should move here, tax benefits, whatever. You're going to divide those two markets. So I gutted the place, and I got to tell you, they wanted to throw me out the window. And here, you think, you were talking about my resume earlier. I was thinking the same thing. I'm walking in there going, yeah, but wait a minute, how come I'm good enough for Coke and Geico and everything, but I'm not good enough for Northeast Indiana? And, that was a reality check for me. But what ended up happening was, all of a sudden, this momentum, it just took off. People didn't like the colors that I chose, which was a Tiffany blue, black, charcoal, cream. You've seen the stuff.
Yep.
If you ever do an image search for NERP or NEIRP, you'll see we had no tagline, no logo, no nothing. And the thing about what I established there was, and I was out to do, was the disassembly. So NEI could mean nearly everything Indiana. It could mean nearly everything innovative. And then Pioneer Starts Here, what we've got is a video rotator. So when I'm talking to the founder of the brand's chocolates, she says, Pioneer chocolatiers here, Pioneer manufacturers here, MedTech's here. So I wanted to create a truly extensible brand that was going to give the audience what they wanted. And that, to me, I'm as proud of that work as I am anything else I've ever done.
That's fantastic. I love that. Jamal Mashburn, for those not familiar, he's a college star, NBA star. How and what made you want to go in business with him? And what does he see in you that he wanted?
Well, he sees an incredibly handsome dude, for one. No. So I started to tell you about T.I., the rapper, right? So Jamal had some mutual attorneys that I had. And I was living in New York on 42nd Street at the time. And they said, hey, T.I. wants to have dinner with you because he was on some reality show. I know he did T.I. and Tiny, but he was something else. So I had dinner with him. The next morning, one of my attorneys came over and he said, hey, T.I. stiffed him on the bill. You got to pay the dinner bill. And I was like, what? And I said, okay, well, how much is it? $1,400. $1,400? We didn't eat that much. Oh, he took a bunch of dinners to go for his posse back at the hotel. And I was like, okay. So then in the next sentence, after I called the restaurant and paid the bill, they said, oh, Jamal Mashburn wants to have dinner with you. And I go, why do I know that name? And they go, he was a basketball player. I go, so I get stiffed by a rapper, and now I'm going to get stiffed by an NBA guy. Is that where this is going? So they were trying so hard to get us together. And then I went to the restaurant 2 times, and Jamal didn't show. And I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm busy. I don't have time for this. So Jamal calls me, and he says, hey, I'm so sorry, man, because he lives in Miami. And he's like, I'm so sorry about this, dude. The guys really want to get us together, so let's have dinner. Okay, so now he's flying up because he was going to see his mom. She's since passed, but she still lived in Harlem. So he shows up. We have a wonderful dinner in the basement of my building. I was coming to the end of my contract with Ogilvy, and now they had to decide what to do with me within the WPP family, right? The basement of my building had a full-size basketball court. So Jamal and I go to dinner with 3 attorneys, all wearing suits, and Jamal and I aren't. And we end up in the basement shooting baskets at 2 a.m. and drinking Blanton's bourbon. The one with the little jockey on top. So we're sitting there shooting baskets, and he goes, so your contract's almost up at Ogilvy? Yeah. Well, what are you going to do next? I go, I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. I said, we'll see if they come to me with something. And he said, well, why don't you join me? Because at the time, he owned over 100 Papa John's. He owns all the Lexus dealerships in Kentucky and California, over 100 Dunkin' Donuts, and then a bunch of other projects. E-Coach we launched, Uptime Energy Drink we launched. So he had his own things going on, and he felt like the marketing firms he was working with weren't very good or weren't telling him what they were doing or whatever. So I started the agency, which now operates all of his businesses. So that's how it started, and it just started because he's a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He's one of the smartest businessmen you'll ever meet. And what's a really good one to watch on him is we actually launched a TV show called Falling Forward, but that ended up becoming 30 for 30 with ESPN because Jamal is very shy when it comes to media attention. Mm-hmm. He feels like he's putting a bullseye on his family's back, and he doesn't want that.
Interesting.
So yeah, but it's since then. Now he's investing in some opportunities in Indiana. Club 720 is one of them. Really interesting business models and things. So now it's like, we're both doing our own thing, and then we come back together and we figure it out. Then we do our own thing, and it works.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how does the partnership with him show up in what you're doing at Indiana?
Well, yeah, because anything, these international companies and things, Indiana, believe it or not, is a really hot commodity right now because it's like depending upon which list you go to, it's in the top 5 or 6 of places to move your business because they have so much land, they have so much resource. There's 10 higher educational facilities in our backyard. So, what you've got is a perfect storm for incubation. So what Jamal did is he figured out pretty quickly that the cost of operating business out of Indiana is cheaper. So when I get wind of opportunities or things to invest in, we're doing a lot of med tech stuff. I tell Jamal about it, and I say, hey, man, if you're interested, you should check this out. And he always does his homework, and if it makes sense in his portfolio, he does it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, you've been in rooms with some really big entertainers, Prince, Janet Jackson, Color Me Bad, CeCe Peniston, right?
Yep.
What is something in those rooms that advertising never teaches you? Something you saw and experienced?
Well, there's a good side and a dark side to entertainment. And honestly, everybody that you mentioned, I never saw anything bad from that. I know that, they used to call it horse track racing. And what that is when you go up to the control board, some of the engineers, they line up cocaine and they see who can do it longer. Across the board. And you start to see truly talented musicians fall apart just because of the pressures and because of the it's a different world. It's a different world that they're brought up in. Jamal would always tell me stories of he keeps his son off of certain brands because they pay he didn't want Jamal Jr. to be getting paid and stuff. And Jamal grew up in that. He didn't even own a basketball. So I could tell you that one, how he got a basketball. But the thing is that you're meeting people that have just such a different set of reality that they just don't know the common things. I remember there was one person, I better not bring up her name, but she was a famous rock star, and she didn't know that you could order a pizza and get it delivered.
Wow.
She had no idea. So I don't know if it's just being sheltered or if you're brought up that way or whatever. Jamal always tells me the story about his daughter, that she was complaining once about the car because he got her a new Lexus, but her friends are all driving Ferraris.
Oh my God.
And he said, how do I explain to my daughter that I didn't even own a basketball until I was in college? Right. And I'm sorry your friends have Ferraris.
Wow. And you quote only have a Lexus.
And you only have a brand new, top of the line, whatever.
Wow.
But that's the reality.
It is.
If you're brought up in that, you can't shield your kids from the reality.
Hey, what are some things that Prince specifically taught you? You think you learned from him?
I got a whole bunch of stuff. I think being around that circle. So I was out there when the Super Bowl was there. Was that '92 maybe? Since we're dating ourselves. So I was the act on the main stage that night, and Prince would always tell people he would have a vision of you. He had a vision of everybody, and he would tell you how to be cool. And he would tell you how to be cool by always keep one hand in your pocket. That's cool. Like, he would teach things like that. But I'll tell you something, watching him in the studio was unbelievable because he did everything with foot pedals. So he would just sit on a stool, whether it's the bass or a regular guitar or whatever he was playing, drums. He was a fabulous drummer. And he would operate everything from the foot pad. The thing about the guy was he worked every single day. And if he taught me one thing, it was to have a great work ethic, because that guy worked harder than anybody I've ever met in my entire life, for sure. And talk about talent. Oh my God. I heard a version he did. Did you ever know about the whole Bad song by Michael Jackson?
No.
So Michael wanted that to be a duet with him and Prince. And he had sent a tape to Prince and to listen to it. Prince hated the song. And he had a quote about the Bad album. He said, do you know why it says Bad on the cover? Because there's not enough room for pathetic. I remember that one. So he had a bone in his side with Michael, but he re-recorded the Bad song and sent it back to Michael and said, this is the way it should be. So, Prince that's why he was never on shows. He was never on The Voice or things like that, because he could never get past the way the song was constructed, and he would always disagree with it.
Yeah.
So he couldn't critique your voice because he's listening to everything else.
Right.
It was crazy. It was good times, though.
If you were to connect your music to your advertising to the now economic development life, is there a through line?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I've always said, when you're in school, you learn the 4 or 5 P's of the marketing mix, right? Product, price, promotion, place, packaging. I always said it's passion, patience, persistence, and perseverance. And if you have those elements, you pay it forward, which would be the final P. I think if, I running track, playing football, growing up an athlete, I had a little bit of a spotlight on me for local things like that, nothing huge. But I think what it learned and it taught me was you're responsible for yourself. So when I would go on stage, I wouldn't be nervous. I'd be excited. Or when I'm going into a presentation to land Expedia, which we landed, it taught me to always be confident and to believe in myself. And I know that sounds cliche, but somewhere along the line, people miss that. They feel that you have to have an attitude to be confident.
Yeah.
Well, I think quiet confidence is 10 times more powerful. And I think that if I wouldn't have gotten my butt kicked a couple times on the track, if I wouldn't have gotten rejected by music labels when I was recording before Prince's guys found me, if I wouldn't have had that rejection, I wouldn't have persevered.
Yeah, I mean, and look, not to go down this rabbit hole, but this is long before the days of participation trophies.
Oh my God, you would get. I remember I came home from a track meet, in high school, and my dad said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "I took second." And he goes, "You know what second is? First place loser." So my dad taught me right away that second place was never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, I want to pivot to something that you did in college. You work with Special Olympics.
Yes.
And I know that's very important to you. And I want to just start with what first got you into that?
Well, because when you're getting money from the school, they typically give you a job, which is kind of BS, right? Go watch the sprinklers turn on, and here's your check, right? So one of the things we hosted the finals, national finals for the Special Olympics, and I've always had this place in my heart because I was a sprinter, and it when I would see people to this day, even I get very emotional because if somebody can't walk. And I'm sitting here sprinting and training and running my butt off and taking it for granted that I can do all these things. And when I got the opportunity, they said, "Hey, would you want to work this?" I said, "Please." So I worked it all 4 years that I was out there. And just being around that and seeing the joy, pure joy on these athletes' faces, it was unbelievable. And it's held such a spark for me that last week, believe it or not, there's a company in Indiana called Turnstone. And what Turnstone does is they help the disabled through sports and through things like that. Well, they were the first ones to host in the United States ever the para volleyball championships. So, they sometimes call it butt volleyball because, you're sitting down and blah, blah, blah. So I tried it, and it's harder than you think. But just being around that and meeting them, meeting the athletes and the people, even when they lose, they're just so joyous and happy to be there that it makes me check myself a little bit,
So tell us about Eddie.
Oh my God, this is changed my life. Eddie was he was a fan. He was in one of those little wheelchairs. They're I don't even know what you call them. They're high but small, and he could never compete. But track and field was his thing, and so was Superman. He would always have, and I made a mistake. I called it a doll. It's an action figure. So there we go. So what happened was he was such a track and field fan, and his parents were pretty independently wealthy. His dad had his own plane, and he was the CEO of a tech company in Denver. It was Denver, Colorado. So anyway, I meet Eddie. He's a big fan. So he and his family start showing up at my track meets around the country just to watch me compete. And if I got my butt kicked because LSU was there or something, I don't know, they always had the best sprinters, he would always come up to me and say, LSU is your kryptonite, you know this? And I'm like, you know what, you can't walk, Eddie. Why are you giving me crap? And we had the best relationship. He unfortunately passed away. He made it to the age of 11.
Wow.
And the thing about it was, over the years, he had given me so many Superman things that to this day, if you look at my LinkedIn or whatever, I always have something Superman on there. And people were misunderstanding that. They either thought I was a comic book nerd or they thought that I thought I was Superman for some reason. But the truth of the matter was, it was always a dedication to him, because if I was running on a televised thing, I'd wear a Superman shirt getting in the blocks and then take it off for my uniform so he would see me. That was my message back to him. And it really taught me that life is precious and that you can find joy in the simple things. And he changed my life. Just meeting him meant so much to me.
What a great story.
All right. Steve, I could talk to you all day, man.
Dude, we're just getting started. Okay. Well, that's a great story about Eddie. Thank you for sharing that with us. Looking at the clock, it's time to wrap it up. And I wrap every episode the same way with the random 5, where I ask my guests 5 random, personal, get-to-know-you questions. So if you're game, here we go.
Always.
First question. What's one thing people assume about you that is completely wrong?
That I'm egotistical.
Okay.
I think I'm confident, and I think I'm a really good person. And sometimes because I'm bold, it masks it a little bit.
Trust me, I can relate. Number 2, when you look ahead 5 years, what scares you more, getting it wrong or playing it safe?
Playing it safe. I can't help but I always want to push myself because time is fleeting.
Yep.
We don't know how long we're going to be here, and I got to make my mark while I got the chance.
Absolutely agree. What is a movie, song, or book that actually feels like it was written about you?
Vision Quest.
Why?
So the author of that was a good friend of mine, Terry Davis, and so student athlete, striving to be more, failing along the way, but in the end he made his mark. Loudon Swain, right? He wrestled, shoot, and he won. So that's really going to date myself, but I'll tell you, I still watch that movie to this day all the time.
It's an 80s classic.
Yes.
Next question. When did you realize you were officially an adult? What was the moment?
I'll let you know when it happens. And that's really my answer.
I love it.
I think I like to find the joy in things. I like to be passionate about things, and I never want to lose boyhood exuberance.
No, I listen, I love that answer. Last question. What's something you forgive quickly in others, but struggle to forgive in yourself?
Mistakes. Just period. You read off portions of my resume. I think I've done some pretty neat things with my teams, of course. Nobody does anything alone. But I'll tell you, when I fail the people around me, and I take it very personally. I don't like to let people down, and I sure as heck don't like to let myself down.
Well, Jonathan Sackett, it's not hyperbolic to say you and I are definitely soul brothers. And
Steve, you're the best, man. Congratulations on the show. This is really, when I was seeing all the guests you get, and now that I got to meet you, truly the honor is mine.
Thank you so much, my friend. I will absolutely look forward to a part 2 because I know that's coming. But in the meantime, thank you again for coming on.
Sounds great, Steve. I'm looking forward to the future.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends, and if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.